signori, buongiorno e benvenuti al Roadshow Bus2Bus in Italia. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome at the Roadshow Bus2Bus in Italy. A warm welcome also from Gaia Coliano next to me and myself, Piero Ronchi, official representative of Messe Berlin in Italy. Italy is the country of Leonardo da Vinci, excellence in technologies, fashion, design. And we used to say that when we sell products and services abroad, we do not just export product and services, but we export a little piece of our country, of our culture, of our philosophy. And we are really very proud for that. But let's start and let's go on the topic of our roadshow. And I have the pleasure to introduce you my colleague in Berlin, Will Beck Jewett, International Communication Bus2Bus.
Thanks, Gaia and Goffredo. A warm welcome from myself and from the rest of the Bus2Bus team here in Berlin to all of our live stream participants. I'm just going to take a few minutes of your time to speak about Bus2Bus, and then we'll start with the roadshow. So I have been part of the Bus2Bus team since it premiered in 2017. And it's been very good to see how it's evolved and grown and gained popularity over the coming years. And Bus2Bus is a mobility trade show and business platform, and it will take place for the 4th time next year at the end of April in 2024 in Berlin. It attracts exhibitors and trade visitors from many countries in all parts of the industry. So urban and public transport, the private bus sector, bus tourism, and long-distance transport. And it really focuses on innovation, sustainable technologies and solutions, and what's coming up in the future of mobility. So we, at the moment, are welcoming all exhibitors who would like to take advantage of our early bird prices, which are available this year until the end of October. And of course, we welcome everybody to come visit us next year in April in Berlin, and we hope to see you there. I would like to start the roadshow with all that being said and welcome our moderator today. His name is Zakis Brustik, or we call him Zach today. And he's not only an experienced moderator and podcast host, he's also focusing on technologies, entrepreneurship, and sustainability. So welcome, Zach, to our roadshow. And I'd say, let's get this roadshow on the road.
Thanks a lot, Willow. I'm very excited to be hosting this panel. I had the pleasure to be also part of the last Bus2Bus, and I'm very excited to see what happened in the meantime now, because I think it's a very dynamic field and with a lot of changes, so it's high time we catch up. And I think my personal experience really that makes me especially excited is I love to bike to work. And just recently I was biking to work and I was biking behind a bus that had an electric drivetrain. And I just realized, wow, what a difference if you drive behind a bus and you don't have the diesel in your face, and what a wonderful future we're gearing towards if this really is everywhere in all cities. It just improves life quality so much. So I'm very excited to be talking about that today. Of course, we have a wonderful panel ready to giving you all the insights about what is happening in the field in general and specifically in Italy. The team of Bus2Bus has really selected specialists that bring in all the perspectives we need, perspectives covering really the manufacturers, perspectives from more like the ecosystem, so the whole association, the media angle, so more or less like the neutral view from the outside. And of course, Pier Goffredo mentioned it, Italy always comes with a big emphasis on design and lifestyle, so we also will cover that angle. The gentlemen representing all the views are already in view, I believe, so let me introduce you to them. On board, we have Francesco Romagnoli. He is on board here on behalf of ANAV, so the association representing more than 600 private bus and coach operators in Italy. His specialty there, or he's wearing the hat specifically for everything involved with technical questions with the question of energy and digital transitions in regards to the vehicles. So being in touch, obviously, with 600 members, he really knows what all these companies are focusing on, worried about, or tackling. Welcome, Francesco.
Thanks, Zach.
Also on board, we have Antonello Conte. He is head of project management and the member of the board of directors at GFG Style. He will bring to us the design perspective, as we already said, because he's actually been working with the Giugiaro family for more than 40 years. I think it's a name you might have heard because they're one of the most successful design families when it comes to the automotive industry. But not only that, they also focus on industrial design and, of course, on bus design. Hence, it's really awesome to have you on board. Welcome, Antonello.
Okay, hello to everybody. I am very proud to be with you for this roadshow.
And of course, it's a field that really depends on technological progress, on research, on bringing together research and design and development. So I'm very happy to welcome on board Luca Cordiviola. He's the R&D manager, the CTO and quality director at IIA, so Industria, Italiana, Autobus, a leading Italian company in the bus sector that also previously was known under the iconic name of Menarini Bus. I'm sure some of you familiar with the industry have heard that name already a couple of times. They're specifically focusing on the public transport within cities and are positioning themselves as like one of the global partners when it comes to sustainable urban mobility. Welcome, Luca.
Thank you, Zach, and to all the participants. I'm very proud to be here to this important meeting. Thank you so much.
Of course, we'll be discussing a lot of questions around hydrogen today. It's one of the important enablers of sustainable mobilities. Hence, we needed somebody on board who brings in all the expertise there is. And in that case, that's Stefano Caprio, the Chief Operating Officer at Punch Hydrocells, a company of the Punch Group. As the name already says, they focus on hydrogen technology in buses, may it be as hydrogen in ICE engines, may it be in fuel cell, or may it be around the whole question of storing and managing hydrogen. Welcome, Stefano.
Thank you, Zach, for the introduction. I'm very excited to be here today. Good morning to everybody.
Yes, good morning. And last but not least, I already mentioned it, it's a hot topic that needs to be discussed with all angles, also with a neutral perspective from the outside, and that's Riccardo Schiavo. He's working for Sustainable Bus, really the leading international media, specifically for the bus and coach industry with regards to low and zero emission public transport. Welcome.
Many thanks, Zach. I'm very glad to be here.
Maybe if I may start with you, Riccardo, and before I ask the first question. So the goal really is that we cover 4 fields if we manage in the time. So we're going to have a look at the electric and hydrogen drives. Then we're going to have a look at what kind of infrastructure generally is necessary to enable that. We're going to have a look at design, new materials, and the image of the bus in general. And last but not least, we'll close with partnerships and startups. And mostly, we also will be integrating the audience into the discussion. So after each block, if you do have questions while we are in the conversation, already post your questions in the chat, and I'll try to integrate a couple of these questions as we go along. So use the chat. Also, just if you want, introduce yourself in the chat now. Let us know what's your name, what company you're in, what are you interested about, and use the chat to also network as participants. That's why we're here. So back to you, Riccardo. It's one really open question still, I believe, that is fiercely discussed with a lot of passion, depending on whether you're from team hydrogen or whether you're from team battery electric vehicles. So where do you see the industry going? Where's the greatest potential for you in regards to buses driven by battery electric engines versus fuel cell? What's your take on this?
Well, thank you very much for the question, and good morning, everybody who is listening and viewing this event. Yeah, I say both technologies has their advantages and limitations. I see battery technology nowadays it is spreading all over the country, while hydrogen technology at the moment is really dependent on institutional policies. We may mention Bolzano, for instance, where actually they have hydrogen buses in operation since 10 years now. They're heavily investing on it. And Bologna, for instance, which has just issued a tender for over 100 hydrogen hydrogen buses. I'd say the fair answer would be that there's no competition. It's more a matter of complementation. So I think there is quite an agreement about the fact that the hydrogen buses are not that much going to be for very inner city services, for the very city centers, more for the suburban services, intercity operations, or maybe in some cities also for the city operations. But when, as mentioned, there will be it will be driven by an institutional decision based on infrastructure, based on availability of hydrogen, based on some political decision, let's say.
That already gives me a perfect bridge to you, Luca, because generally people say, you know, inner city short distance, battery electric, out of the city long distance, maybe more hydrogen. But also then the question is, what does the regulator decide? What are the clients deciding? So it's a really tricky strategic question, I guess, to answer from the IIA perspective. How are you positioning the company in regards to that question?
Yes, what you said is completely true. We are in a turning point in this moment for the bus application because electric vehicles are existing since many years. What is changing is that now they are becoming the real vehicles that are used for the everyday operation. So they must keep the city transport. The first of things is to understand the new customer needs, passenger capacity that before was not an issue, infrastructure, time for charging, battery extension warranty. All these factors did not exist when we were talking about ICE engine and ICE vehicle. What is the real strategic point is to move from a concept that was to change a traditional vehicle and to move to have a vehicle born electric. It means to change everything, the layouts of components. For instance, the frequency of the noise is changing. Now there is an electric traction. There is not anymore a diesel engine. The optimization of the heating management is very complex with an electric vehicle. So what is changing now is not to say to have an electric vehicle. We need to have a performing electric vehicle that is able to keep the operating day transport services that are given by our customer. So it's an improvement day by day of the technology in the performance. This is the key point.
And what are the strategies when you look at the two different segments? Because you said it's like a completely new bus from ground up, but I guess there's a difference whether it's the electric version or the hydrogen version. So do you have two different strategies?
There is a really common platform because the traction is the same. Some batteries are the same because also in the hybrid you use a limited capacity, 60 kilowatts, and you have 230 kilowatts on the wheel. So you use let me say, some batteries to accumulate the braking and the acceleration energy needs. So you can have a common platform. In some cases, we can talk of a range extender. Is a system because all the other parts are common, but really is a common platform. This is the important point. Is let me say, an evolution. Is an evolution. Also in the future it can be because there will be also a cost factor because today we are boarding around 3 tons batteries, okay, to have around 500 kilowatts per hour. With an hydrogen vehicle, you can reduce the battery because they're using like a buffer for the energy, and also the cost because the technology of fuel cell with the industrialization and also coming from car manufacturing will be a key factor also for the city bus because today with the city bus we can reach also 500 kilometers of operating range. An operator usually do 220, 250. So today we can do the operating of every day without any limit.
Thank you, Luca. I'll pass on to you, Francesco, because I'm based out of Germany. And, you know, obviously Germany has a huge legacy in combustion engines. So the big question is always, what does the regulator decide? And which technology is really being pushed makes a big difference. So maybe you can give us a perspective how that plays out in Italy. So what's the funding situation? What's the regulatory framework for these two alternatives in Italy? And how is it affecting your ANAV members?
Yes, when we speak about funds in bus and coach industry, we have to bear in mind that they are above all for public transport funds and regulation, because the coach in a long distance occasional service are less regulated and there are less funds. And in Italy, I think funds right now is a mix between European funds and Italian funds, like I think all the European countries, because we have some funds from Next Generation EU, other European funds, and from some specific Italian funds. And they are above all relating on the purchase of the electric and hydrogen buses for urban and regional services. And this is very good for the sector, because it's a good strategy to boost the energy transition. And what we see in our companies is that they are organizing for the transition. They are very aware. The awareness is increasing very quickly. For example, we did a specific training course last month related on the electric buses, and many of our companies attended it because they know that they have to purchase, and we have more and more electrical buses in their fleets. But what I have to say is that we have a not so good situation in Italy, because we have a very high average age for national fleet, more than 10 years. We have 1,000 and 1,000 of Euro 2 and Euro 3, so buses with more than 20 years. And what we ask, what we need is the possibility to buy traditional diesel buses in some specific situation to boost the purchase of new buses, because what we know is that alternative fuel buses are very expensive. So sometimes for us it's better purchasing traditional buses when we have very, very old buses.
Thank you, Francesco. Yeah, it certainly is an area. I mean, of course, new technology comes with a higher price tag. It really depends on regulators also providing funds in order to to launch the energy into mass adoption. So that's certainly something that hopefully will develop even further, and also in regards to bureaucracy becoming shorter to actually get those funds. But let's have a look. Stefano, you're obviously playing for Team Hydrogen. So how do you see hydrogen fuel cells evolving in the future? What role do you see your company playing in that field? Because I guess there's this evolution. What I see really interesting is that you actually have been an executive also very long in regards to diesel engines. So you really see that from diesel engines to hydrogen in combustion engines to the fuel cell. So what evolution do you see there happening? What opportunities? And you're still on mute, Stefano.
Hello to everybody. So the interesting questions. In general, we see the growth of the fuel cell market in hydrogen commercial vehicle segments. Basically, we see this growth in buses, truck, off-way, marine, power gen, and railway. In the passenger cars and small delivery van segments, we believe that the battery electric vehicle will be the main zero CO2 technology. The advantage of the fuel cells versus a battery electric vehicle architecture in commercial vehicles is driven by mainly three parameters. We can summarize as lower weight, longer range, and shorter recharging time. On the other side, the fuel cell has a lower efficiency if we compare it to the battery electric vehicle system. Now, looking specifically to the bus sector, the above mentioned the lower efficiency of the fuel cell translates in heat availability for the bus cabin heating system during a cold season. Whereas when we talk about battery electric vehicle, the heating energy has to be added to the battery specification with related additional costs and weight. Just to give you an example, in some North European countries, the energy required during the winter to keep the cabin warm is the equivalent of 19 liter of diesel. So it's a huge amount. And on the fuel cell system, you can get these out of the engine running itself without additional requests. From a cost perspective, talking about the fuel cell, today what we see in the market in terms of fuel cell are the current generation of fuel cell are mainly 80, 90 kilowatts. And we see a cost of, in terms of euro per kilowatts, it is in the range between 500 to 700 euros per kilowatts. In the next generation that will come in more or less 2-3 years, what we will see will be a shift in terms of power of the systems. It will be a power between 150, 160 kilowatts fuel cells with a cost range that will go down between 350 and 150 euro per kilowatts. This lower portion of the range, of course, will depend from the volumes. In general, we will expect that between now and 2030 in Europe, there will be a significant increase of fuel cell volumes. We, as our company, are active in fuel cell development, distribution, and integration based on long-lasting partnership with General Motors, the US company that is developing fuel cell since very long time. Just because you mentioned it, it's worth to also mention here that the fuel cell, it's not the only technology when we talk about hydrogen for mobility, but we are actively working also on the hydrogen internal combustion engine. This is a solution that we think can help increasing the consumption of hydrogen and contributing actively to the zero CO2 emission world.
Now I muted myself, sorry. Thanks a lot, Stefano. It's really interesting because you added another angle. Usually the discussion is always hydrogen, battery electric in range terms, but you also added we need to have a look at the temperature angle in very cold countries. And I think that same probably goes for very hot areas. Then you need the energy for cooling. Now, Luca earlier mentioned that it's a completely different bus that needs to be redesigned from ground up. What does that mean for your profession, Antonello? So is that actually a designer's dream because you suddenly can start from scratch with a white sheet? And what advantages do you see? What new design opportunities?
Okay, thanks, Zach, for the question. Of course, with the electric and the hydrogen drive buses, the design can have a lot of freedom to propose something very different from traditional diesel engine buses. Thanks to a different technical packages and the different hard points, it will be possible to propose new shapes, new modern surfaces, and distinctive appearance of the buses. In this way, it is easier for the designer to reveal the generation gap from the old traditional diesel buses and the new energies one. The new layout of the innovative drive solution can also allow a more aerodynamic, streamlined design, along with their lightweight feature, can further reduce the energy consumption and increase the range of each energy refueling. The differentiation, of course, will be not only on the exterior design. It will be possible to appreciate where it's possible to appreciate the generation gap from outside, thanks also to the use of lightweight composite material, aerodynamic flash surfaces, innovative glasses perimeter around the bus, exterior wrapped graphics able to emphasize the clean energy vehicle. Moreover, the new technology will help in design also to propose different innovative lamps, front and rear, cameras instead of rear view mirror, radar, sensor all around the buses in order to help the driver work, especially in the urban area. The absence of the traditional combustion engine can create more space for passenger and cargo also, and which leaves to the designer the space to propose a more logical and comfortable door and seats arrangement to create a better passenger flow in enter and exit and a bigger passenger capacity. Of course, the designer could work also in the interior due to the possibility to study new architecture, offering a better comfort. In the previous interview, someone talked about the silence on board. That it's very important also to have a very pleasant trip. And it's possible also to play with different possibility of interior layout compared to the traditional diesel engine. So in conclusion, we can say that the new energy buses offer a big range of opportunities for the designers to highlight the eco-friendly features, emphasizing the sustainability and innovation for the coming future.
Thank you, Antonello. And I guess it's really actually important. All the things you mentioned is that it's more convenient to get into the bus. It's a more pleasant experience. It's not just that it makes the experience nicer. It's probably really important to nudge people from using their cars, changing to public transportation, just because it is also on a completely new level, and which, of course, we all know we need to up public transportation by 100% in order to reach net zero. So I guess the new design opportunities have a very important role to play to actually enable that. But before we get there, we need to make sure that the whole concept of buses driven with renewable energies actually realizes, and a big question mark behind that is the available infrastructure, the available amount of hydrogen. So in the next block, we'll focus on the infrastructure and the mobility hubs. Before we get there, the question and invitation to the audience, if you do have any questions to our panelists, to Luca, to Riccardo, and the others, just put the questions in the chat. The team will forward the questions to me and I'll use them in the discussion. So time to ask your questions. I'll just make sure to check if there's anything as we go along. Now, we'll come back to what you just mentioned, Antonello, but before we do a little detour into the infrastructure area, it's quite interesting. I was talking to some truck executives in Bavaria, and they all want hydrogen trucks on the streets, and asked them, where do you get the hydrogen from? And they're like, yeah, well, not from the North Sea. We'll probably get it from Italy because we want to build a pipeline there or use a pipeline. I was like, that's interesting. Maybe Italy actually needs to use that hydrogen itself. So that's the first question to you, Stefano. What is the current state of hydrogen infrastructure in Italy? What challenges do you have to make it available, accessible at a reasonable price point? And how do you get it from singular points really spread out into the wide field?
Yeah, so before to talk about infrastructure, we needed to frame the infrastructure discussions under the European framework. Last March 27th, European Union institution reached a deal on the alternative fuels infrastructure regulation. And that is a key piece of legislation for Europe's nascent hydrogen-powered road transport sector. The Article 6 of this regulation mandates the construction of one gaseous hydrogen refueling station, HRS, every 200 kilometers. So this is the maximum distances that there must be between two different hydrogen fuel stations. This is for what concerns the so-called TENT, that is the Trans-European National Transportation. And this has to happen by 2030. As well as on HRS, in every urban node, the station will have a daily supply capacity of 1 ton of hydrogens, and this is a mandatory requirement for the refueling stations. So what does this mean? This means that the member states must prepare an HRS, so an hydrogen refueling station deployment plan by 2027 that will satisfy the needs of all hydrogen-powered road mobility. What is the situation in Italy? In Italy, the Ministry of Infrastructure and Transport has recently published the ranking of 36 projects that have been admitted to public funding for construction of new filling station dedicated to hydrogen, with a contribution from the Italian state of approximately 103 million euros, approximately. In total, they have been budgeted 230 million euros for HRS in Italy. And this will be financed through the so-called PNRR, that is a funding tool that we have in Italy. And those 36 refueling stations will have to be ready by the end of 2026. So if those 36 projects will be realized, then the Italian scenario in terms of hydrogen infrastructure will change strongly. Why I'm saying it will change strongly? Because you need to think that today Italy has just 2 hydrogen refueling stations. One is in Bolzano and the other one is in Mestre. So this will create really a strong change. And also what is important are the so-called hydrogen valleys, that are small regions where there will be the production of hydrogen, and from where the hydrogen will be then shipped to all the hydrogen refueling stations. I hope I answered your question, Zach.
Absolutely, Francesco. It means there is a lot of work to be done. Now, some part of that work is in your own hands as the Italian industry on how fast, you roll out the infrastructure, you build up the capacities to build hydrogen. A big chunk of it is out of your hands because it depends actually on having the supply chains ready and delivering to actually build the hydrogen infrastructure and charging points. And we all know last years, there have been huge issues. Also, China is one of the main important countries to deliver components or materials, has a big interest itself in the materials. So, Francesco, how are you looking at that issue, and how can the ANAV help the Italian industry to really secure supply chain issues or supply chain access, and also at a reasonable price?
Yes, in general, as we already Stefano said, we have some specific national plans and funds for infrastructure. Infrastructure is in general an issue for our company, because to do the transition, we know that we have infrastructure, depot infrastructure, or general infrastructure. For example, for public transport, we have depot infrastructure. You have to have your proper infrastructure in the depot, your proper filling station. For other services, like for example long services or tourism services, you have to have infrastructure in the country, in the field of the country. And we don't have many filling stations, for example hydrogen, as already Stefano said, but something is moving on. For us, these 36 projects are very important, because our companies could purchase hydrogen buses in the future more than today, because if you operate close to the filling station, you can operate with hydrogen bus. But in general, infrastructure is an issue, because, for example, sometimes the timeline of the purchase of buses is shorter than the construction of infrastructure. So if today I have some funds to buy electric buses, I have, of course, to have the infrastructure in the depot. Sorry, my camera. Okay, and but sometimes the timeline is longer for infrastructure. And also, the risk is having the buses but don't have the infrastructure. What we try to do is to tell to the politics that infrastructure has a very big issues for companies, and infrastructure and filling station, and try to solve these issues and manage the transition in the proper way, taking into account all problem and issues to do the transition in a better way.
Thank you, Francesco. Riccardo, Stefano already provided a lot of figures and numbers specifically for the hydrogen segment. Maybe you can give us the overall view when we look at zero emission transport and mobility. Do you have some additional numbers that one needs to know currently, and the latest numbers, so to say?
Yes, well, I'm happy to do this. Today, just to give a global figure, there are around 500 battery electric buses in operation in Italy, plus I guess around 20 fuel cell buses. Italy, it is at the moment the 10th European country in number of electric buses in operation. There are a few cities which are leading this. First of all, Milan, which has the ambitious target of electrifying the whole fleet, 1,200 buses by 2030, and today they have kind of 300 battery electric buses, no, a little less, I guess, between 200 and 250 battery electric buses in operation. Another few figures about last year, the market of last year, there were 120 e-buses registered, and there was a decrease in 2022 compared to 2021. Battery electric buses last year made around 15% of Italian new city bus registrations. There is a European average of 30%, so it is half of the European average market share of electric buses at the moment. But there are kind of huge tenders in the pipeline. There are 1,000 buses up for grabs, let's say, from the central purchasing body, which is Consip. And as mentioned before, Milan is out with a tender for 330 e-buses, and there I could mention also around 800 e-buses that are coming in the next years in Rome. I will end up my answer with a couple of figures about money. Yeah. Financing is not lacking at the moment, as Francesco has been mentioning before. It is the Sustainable Mobility Fund plus European generation fundings. In total, just to give an idea, there are 6 billion euros for the purchase of zero-emission buses in the coming years. And the government has stated already a couple of years ago that there will be no fundings for diesel buses anymore in the country. In conclusion, being very long story short, the market is making some progresses. The supply chain issues and inflation also are not helping, because sometimes there was tender that were issued with a certain value, but at the time where the bid were the manufacturer had to bid, inflation has changed the cards on the table, so that was not helping absolutely. There's significant room for growth, let's say.
Thank you, Riccardo. And I also mentioned, I saw that there is a question in the chat now, because we've been mainly talking about hydrogen buses currently. So Alstom asks if the Italian industry or also the bus operators are really focusing on hydrogen, or how big of a portion electric buses will play. We'll also get there as we go on with the panel, but maybe one of you guys wants to answer that question. Maybe it's a good question, actually, for Francesco, because you represent the whole industry, so to say.
So the question is if companies are more focused on electric or hydrogen buses now?
No, it's like because we've talked a lot about hydrogen buses. Yeah. That does not necessarily mean electric buses don't play is equally important role. So the question was just like, how much weight do you give both technologies?
But I think it depends on the type of service, because each service has the specific needs. And of course, now probably electric buses are more purchased than hydrogen buses, because technologies and market is more ready than hydrogen buses. But in the future, what we think is that hydrogen could be a great solution for long distance services. So we are happy that some manufacturers announced that they are thinking about long hydrogen coach, because for us could be a very interesting solution for the future. Not next future, but in the future, could be a very interesting solution.
I think, Luca, you also wanted to answer that question, if I saw it correctly.
Yes, I agree to what was mentioned. Basically, it depends on the operation service that we are talking about. If you are talking about a coach on a motorway, okay, today surely by battery is a little bit difficult. Let me say, the refilling of an hydrogen bus it can be quite faster like diesel, let me say, fuel refilling. No? So it can be really replacing the traditional diesel coaches. For city buses, that the vehicle is managed internally. I mean, every night the vehicle come back to the vehicle depot. Okay, so is not a big issue, the parts of operation, okay, because the autonomy is enough to cover all the day without any problem. It depends on the line. You know, in the middle you have the intercity that is a little bit longer distance than the coach. Than a city bus, in short, than a coach, and so is a let me say, is a tuning of them. The second factor, as I mentioned before, is that we have to see the cost of the batteries in future and the cost of the fuel cell. I mean, both vehicles are zero-emission vehicle. Okay. Also, the ones that are using battery with the fuel cell is always we call hybrid, are always zero-emission vehicle. No? It really is something, and I say with the common platform that I mentioned before, you really can tune like a range extender. No? In some cases, it's called a range extender, the fuel cell, as an application on electric bus. Is open. What we need to have is to have the both solution on common platform and to be ready, no, according to the customer needs and the evolution also in future, which one to speed up in the evolution.
Maybe if I may continue there, Luca, because Stefano earlier mentioned, I think there's 2 hydrogen charging points, if I still have that number correctly in my mind. We'll scale it up very quickly. At the same time, the technology is being developed, and every year there's new charging technologies, there's higher pressures when charging hydrogen. So how do you make sure that the existing and future infrastructure stays compatible with all the different manufacturers? You know, I mean, me as an industry outsider, just looking at how much work it takes to make sure your phones have the same connector. How does that play out in the bus and coach industry to make sure that all the various models can be charged on the same infrastructure? Luca?
Yes. Basically, all the electric vehicles, they have a, let me say, a plug for the recharge. We are already increasing 2 or 3 because the logistic of the vehicle inside the parking of the operator is quite complicated when you have dozens and dozens of vehicles. There are new systems that are with the pantograph. In this case, the pantograph is installed on the vehicle or on the infrastructure. It allows to quick charge the vehicle. To give you an idea, with the plug socks, we can charge around 150 kilowatts power electricity, 150. Okay, with the pantograph, you can reach 400 kilowatts. Okay, is a huge quantity of energy that can be injected in the vehicle. Okay, in this case, with the 400 kilowatts, you can in a little bit around 1 hour, you can fill up the vehicle completely. This is also easier in the operation of the vehicle. When they go to the parking, they activate the pantograph and they can load. Also, another solution is the opportunity charger. That means the vehicle has a limited quantity of batteries. At the end of the line, so when the vehicle stops around 10-15 minutes, the vehicle can be charged. So the quantity of the energy boarded is around 100 kilowatts per hour. instead of the 400s, 500s that are charged only one time. In this case, at the end of the line, the vehicle is charged, it can operate. And this is also another solution. About the hydrogen vehicles, in this case, we have a standard for the filling of the vehicle. We are operating a pressure of 350 bar. Okay, in some cases they can reach also up to 700 in some solution. Depends also on the station and that is needed. The quantity of hydrogen is only 37 kilos, so it's a very powerful element to the hydrogen, and the charging can be done as I mentioned before, around 9-12 minutes for the charging, full charging. Okay, so it's really easy to operate. As said before, the advantage for city operator is that you put one charging point and you can charge 100 of vehicles. Okay, they don't need to find it on the motorway every 200 kilometers, 300 kilometers. This is the advantage of the city bus mission.
Thank you, Luca. Now you mentioned the charging, and you mentioned also, of course, how that is part of city planning, and which leads me back to Antonello, because you already said a lot how the design of the buses itself will change and the usability. If you look outside of the bus at the whole context of the city, mobility hubs, the urban infrastructure, what is your vision in that area? How will mobility hubs look like? How will highway stops look like in the future from a design perspective?
Yeah, we can say that change is in mobility in general. So the car owner are becoming less. People, for many reasons, are going the direction to rent a car in case of need only. So these situations are growing in the most part of the world, and it is easy to imagine an exponential growth of the public transport sector to the full benefit of clean energy, bus and coaches industry. Smaller cars, leased or directly rented, are becoming the major trend for the young generation of people moving around the metropolitan areas, with the smaller vehicles to be used in the city centers, and public transportation becoming more important also for the movement towards the city from outside. So the research in the integration of the last mile mobility to the more traditional forms of transportation is vital to create a unified, coordinated system, moving people from their starting point to their final destination in an organized and efficient way. Hydrogen and electrical buses are clean energy, and this aspect is fundamental in the urban planning. Also, in this case, the design have a fundamental role not only to study and to create the long, mid, and short distance public vehicles, but also to imagine first and then to create the new hubs offering charging station, battery swapping station for electrical vehicles, and the refueling station from hydrogen vehicles. Of course, the new hubs need to offer the best environment for 1,000 of people in terms of bus station, bar, restaurant, shops, waiting room, entertainment center. Because in these hubs, the passenger will spend a big part of their journey, of their time. And the hubs will become similar to a modern airport, train station, and in order to be able to host a lot of people in the same time. And talking about us, this situation is a great opportunity for Giugiaro Architettura and GFG Style. In fact, our architect and our industrial automotive design are still working some project in the recent period, because this, let me say, situation offer new challenges that the sustainable living is offering us.
I'd love to continue there with one follow-up question, Antonello. But before, let me invite back the audience again. Ask your questions in the chat, post them, we'll integrate them, because now actually Antonello already provided a perfect bridge to enter our third cluster, all around design, new materials, and the image of the bus itself. So before we dive in that, make sure to post your questions in the chat, and we'll integrate them as we go along. Now, Antonello, it's something that you mentioned earlier before already. The design might look completely different. The infrastructure, the hubs around it might be very different. Now, I think buses have a very interesting role. On the one hand, even if you look at the emissions of diesel buses, they're still one of the most sustainable means of transportation, because usually they're fully loaded. And if you compare them with with airplanes, even with trains, they have a very good footprint already. Now that will improve significantly. Yes, it always seems to be, compared to car, trains, and other means, the least sexy means of transportation. So what opportunities do you see to make the bus and people's perception more attractive and give it higher value? How can design contribute to that? Antonello.
So I lost a little bit your voice, but anyway, the bus has always been developed in a traditional way in order to optimize cost efficiency. Now with the new platforms, thanks to electric and hydrogen revolution, can provide the operators with the possibility of developing new layouts. In this case, able to give a more engaging passenger experience, and in order to make the journey more memorable instead of painful compared to the past. So in this case, design can play an important role in improving the attractiveness and the perception of buses and coaches. The designer goal must be that of mixing the new layouts with the eye-catching design, integrating friendly, innovative materials, of course, without forgetting to provide the fulfillment of all the legal norms and regulations that are still important also in the future, and at the same time able to create an innovative experience in transportation. So a pleasing interior, especially interior design, can help to create a better user experience, working, as I said before, on seat arrangement and design, attractive livery with eco-friendly and innovative materials, convenient and practical detail such as charging points, monitor, audio system, information about the journey. So a very pleasant travel experience can make the buses and coaches more appealing to the passenger. User-centered design, in this case, is fundamental in improving the attractiveness and the perceptions of the buses, can help a lot to identify the needs and the expectation of the passenger and create this design that meets the needs.
Maybe Riccardo, if I can ask more or less the same question at you, because of course Antonello is very passionate about the subject. Let's have you maybe as a little bit more neutral or critical perspective on the industry itself. How do you think, how could the overall appeal of bus traveling be increased? Like, what does the industry really need to focus on? What is the demand generally in Italy from the customer perspective?
Mm-hmm. Well, okay, first of all, I'd like to propose Antonello Conte for the role of the next Ministry of Transportation in Italy. You have my vote, Antonello, for sure. No, let's say, I found very fascinating the topic already mentioned by both Antonello Conte and Luca Cordiviola about the development of new designs for born electric vehicles, really born electric vehicles. I'm sure this could help revamping the image of buses, but if you allow me to be a little bit critical, I'm not that sure that it could be really enough to boost the use of public transport. I will start from a consideration. Data clearly shows it's a global topic that the percentage of young people under 30 years old, under 35 years old with a driving license is decreasing a lot. It has been half compared to 20 years ago. Then a modal shift to other means of transportation will have to happen. It will be, although false to say that today using public transport is a growing trend. But I mean, in this regard, also COVID has not helped, of course. From my point of view, I mean, commercial speed and user-friendly travel platforms are really king. So investment, what is really important, but it is also the position of WTP, for instance, is that investments in new energy, in alternative drives, should not detract from the offer of public transportation. I mentioned just three topics, three trends, let's say. A focus on digital travel experience. We had a couple of interesting projects in Italy, such as in Genoa, for instance, with the Bluetooth validation and the mobility as a service app that makes it very easy to move in and out public transport means. Just a few days ago, ATM Milano has ended the installation of contactless validators on the whole fleet of buses, and it is helping. This could really help the use of public transport, make it really much easier. Talking of commercial speed, as I mentioned before, this is really the topic. People who use public transport expect to get from A to B in the quickest way. BRT projects are starting in Italy, and I think it is also a good news. And with BRT, I mean buses on dedicated lines with the infrastructures requirement. Additionally, I'd say the implementation, we are starting to see something, and I guess we will see more in the future, of flexible on-demand form of transportation could be also very helpful in pushing the shift to sustainable mobility.
Thank you, Riccardo. Now it's interesting, you already mentioned that the, so to say, the customer segments are changing significantly. Antonello, already framed the overall vision of how the bus itself could change, but also mentioned that, of course, so far, cost effectiveness has been a big driver. Now, Luca, from the industry perspective, actually manufacturing the bus and bringing all these various considerations together, customer segments, design opportunities, new sustainable materials, still cost effectiveness, of course, being important. Where does the way lead from the manufacturing perspective?
Yes, there are some important factors to be considered. The first is that for the electric buses, we wanted to optimize all the layout for the comfort of the passenger. So less podested, that are the internal steps, more visibility with the windows, because you don't have any more of the engine compartment in the rear, putting all the components on the roof. This means anyway to keep particular attention on the strength of the chassis and the structure of the vehicle, because to give you an idea, among the batteries and the heating pump and so on, we have around 4 tons added on the roof, 4 tons. So it's quite huge, and that is for the benefit of the internal layout of the passenger. We said another intervention that we are doing is the improvement with some specific material for the insulation. The insulation for the heating and the heat and the cold. As I told before, the heat management is taking a huge quantity of energy for the vehicle, so the insulation is important with additional materials, some specific materials. The other is the noise. We are talking external noise 8 dB less than a traditional diesel vehicle. 8 dB. 3 dB means already half of a noise impact. Okay. Internally, we are around 4 dB less. Okay. So now we are trying to make quieter and to reduce the noise of all the other components that before you cannot hear because the engine noise. No, this concept means that the material that we are using, we are more and more using plastic like ABS that are possible to be recycled instead the more difficult fiberglass solution. About the batteries, the most, let me say, useful application is the reuse of the batteries. Consider that according to the ISO standard, when you reach 80% of state of health of battery, usually you replace. These are the conditional warranty that we give, and the warranty on the batteries, they are around 8 years. So after 8 years, you can have 80% of the capacity. These batteries can be used for other applications, are used in the civil application, for instance, in the houses for the storage of the energy with the solar panel, okay? Because you have a huge quantity, are very, very, let me say, battery with a high density of energy, Okay, so this is the reuse. So after 8-10 years, you have a second life that can be additional 10 years in the civil use. Okay, so it means that one battery will stop, will need to be recycled after 20 years. So it's a long time, not that is taking. So these are the main factor on the material. We something to make it lighter, but basically to take care of the different positioning of the weight. Are no more on the floor, are on the roof. It was easier to put on the floor with the internal steps and so on, but it's not. We wanted to associate to new technology, to something that is better for the customer, the citizen of the city, and the driver. The driving style improve a lot. Okay, you have electric traction, so the acceleration, the brake is smooth, comfortable. So it's not only the environment, the electric vehicle and the hydrogen also, because as we say, I put together because are together in terms of vehicle platform, are giving not only an environment very important environment contribution, but also for the comfort and the use to be more open to all the passengers.
Thank you, Luca. And you also mentioned already the long duration of batteries and the significance of second life use. That could be a whole discussion in itself, also in regards how it helps to actually refinance the more expensive technology compared to traditional ICE buses. So, but we'll just tease it here. We won't dive into it because it's a discussion in itself. Now, coming to you, Francesco, already mentioned earlier, just already with traditional engines, buses actually, compared to other means of transportation, already have a favorable footprint. They're also flexible. Now, switching to renewables, they'll have an even better footprint. They have a really significant role to play to reach our climate targets. But of course, they're still in competition to all the other means of transportation. So how is the ANAV, as sort of also the lobby organization, I guess, for the 600 bus operators, positioning itself to make sure that we can make use of all these advantages in competition to other means of transportation?
Yes, this is a very good question, because when we speak about transition in general, we always think that we have to reduce the emission of the fleets in general, no? Car fleets, bus fleets, truck fleets. And what we have to bear in mind that in the transition, bus and coach are not the problem of the pollution or of the climate change, but are the solution. We, of course, all agree that we have to reduce the emission of the fleets, but we have to know that in general we are bus and coach sector is in general a very tiny part of the pollution and the CO2 emission. For example, in Italy, refer to the all CO2 emission, or not only transport emission, but all human sector emission. Bus and coach are less than 1%. I mean, like 0.7% of the total, so a very tiny part of the pollution and CO2 emission. And we know that using bus is one of the best way to move in a sustainable way, because so we have to use bus and coach, but I mean collective transport in general, like the mode to reduce emission, and we have to promote bus and coach sector. And ANAB is try to do it. We of course agree to the necessity to reduce emission of the fleets, but above all, we think about we have to promote the sector. We ask to increase, for example, services. What we think is that people, of course, like electric buses, but what they need, what they want, is that the bus or is on time and is not so old. and it's not so important the type of the fuel, if it's electric or traditional. Of course, probably electric is more cool, of course, but it's not the most important part of the problem, because what we think is that bus have to pass on time. We have to have many services, and this is the way the people will take bus and leave their car at home. So this the way to promote bus and transition and to reduce emission.
Thank you, Francesco. I think that also resonates with something that Riccardo was saying earlier, that it's really important to also think outside of the bus. How can I book end to end? How can I? You didn't really go in full detail, but that's what I understood, Riccardo, that you also have to think of the whole digital ecosystem around it. Now we are already.
I was mentioning like just mobility as a service. This kind of a global trend. So making it finding the route, booking the route, and paying the route easier with a mobile.
Yeah,
with an explanation that
And I guess that really is a big enabler of making sure that the bus industry can use its full potential for reaching the climate goals or contributing to it. Now.
I really agree with Riccardo. Digitalization is another topic. It's a good way to promote the sector. Yes, really. Thanks, Riccardo.
We are already a little bit over time, but we'll extend the event because we are having a great discussion. And also, I heard from the directors in the back, we're allowed to talk a little bit longer. That means, of course, we'll have to speed up, however, a little bit. And we'll just close this cluster and then we'll go into the last cluster. But before we close this, Stefano, I already learned the whole design will change. Electric and hydro cell buses will sort of have the same platform, though. So that means the whole experience on top of the platform for the user is the same. But if we look in the technology itself, I guess there's also a constant development when it comes to new, sustainable, intelligent materials being used. What's been something that you have been particularly excited about recently, specifically when it comes to hydrogen buses, like new developments in that field?
Okay, as was mentioned before by Luca, an hydrogen fuel cell bus is an electric vehicle that utilize a different battery from the battery electric vehicle and has an hydrogen fuel cell to produce electricity and heat. So based on this kind of definition, we can say that the changes between fuel cell versus BEV are not so huge. The change that we see are the installation of the hydrogen storage system and also the installation of the fuel cell itself. Instead, it's a much huge change when you move from internal combustion engine to fuel cell engine, because in that case, you need to change completely the architecture, moving from mechanical to electrical. So this is the big change that we see when we move from an internal combustion engine bus to a fuel cell bus. For what concerns the materials, also in this case, the topic has to be framed within the current European framework. We as Punch strongly support the spirit of the European Critical Raw Material Act, aimed at reducing the dependency of our technology sector from material that are suffering scarcity or coming from unstable geography, from a political perspective. So what we see is that it's required a stronger focus on the advanced materials, which are key to increase performance and durability of hydrogen technology, while reducing the load of critical raw materials. In a nutshell, today we know that in the fuel cell, in the membrane of the fuel cell, there are some material, rare material that needs to be, we needed to find new material, new technologies that will be able to replace this kind of materials that are rare, and so will allow us to be free of dependency from raw material. Another important point also is that all these efforts on efficiency should go hand in hand also with the development of world-class dismantling, recycling, and refining technology for the recovery of the critical raw material. In a nutshell, this is the circular economy. Circular economy is something that also European Union is following very strictly. And what is dictated by the circular economy is that any product, when it is designed, has to be thought for its life and also for the dismantling and for the end of life. It's like to say that when you have a vehicle plant, a plant that is producing vehicles, it is taught on one side to send out vehicles, but on the other side to accept back vehicles and that are at the end of the life and then needs to be dismantled and reused. So this is a very important step that we need to do, and this is considered as a economy transition that is parallel to the energy transition. So it's a very, very important topic, discussion on the material and how to make sure that we are free of dependency.
Thank you, Luca. Sorry, you still had a point?
Last point, Zach, in terms of advanced production processes, we as Punch have a significant experience in additive manufacturing. That is a totally different way to see the manufacturing, because in normal manufacturing you are removing material. In the additive manufacturing, you are starting from powders and you are building up products, pieces.
Now, you threw in a lot of important words: circular economy, additive manufacturing, the innovation of business models, because it's not the bus operator selling the bus to other regions in the world, but sending it back to the actual manufacturer at the end of the life cycle. So that's a lot of changes. That's a lot of innovation. And usually when you talk about innovation, young companies, startups play a huge role working together with established companies. So that's something we'll have a look in now to close the session. We'll have to speed up here with the questions and the answers to make up for a little bit of lost time. So just very quickly, Riccardo, specifically, if you look into the ecosystem of young companies and large companies, what have you been especially excited about? What innovation did you see in the Italian mobility sector?
Yeah, it's like I'll be very quickly just mention two startups. I think that kind of interesting in Italy. The first is Eco, is an engineering company, a spin-off from the Polytechnical University of Milan. They realized that a fast charging technology for buses, have a project in France for producing electric buses without battery. Basically, they use supercapacitor instead of batteries, which is a kind of an original concept. It's not ADV. It is just mentioning something that I think it is original. It is not that common. The second I'd like to mention is OpenMove. It is an Italian startup focusing on mobility as a service, a young company with some interesting contracts in Italy and abroad. That's all from my side.
Yeah, thank you, Riccardo. That was crisp and concise. Now, Francesco, I know it's very important for young companies to actually have industry companies working with them together. And they usually, because young companies need to find customers very quickly before their funding runs out. So I guess ANAV as an enabler in the middle plays a big role. I know it's also a big concern of Bus2Bus to bring those two different segments together, startups and established companies, so that the startups really have already access to a market and first customers. So how is ANAV playing a role there as an enabler? Francesco.
Yes, I was muted. We are in general in contact with many of the companies of the industry, like for example, manufacturer, of course, or the tech companies, because what we see is that our sector is more complicated than in past. Company operators have to have more things than in past, like for example technologies, digital ticketing, or I think it's more complicated than in past, and there are more companies than in past. And we are always try to create a link between operators and industry. And we organize the Italian exposition every 2 years. We are happy to promote your expo. So for us, it's normal to create a link between operators and companies, tech companies or manufacturer or others.
Thank you, Francesco. Luca, now you, of course, as a manufacturer, the whole company is transforming. You're positioning yourself also really as the partner in the global demand for sustainable transportation. So what partnerships have been important for you? And very quickly, what recommendation would you have for other companies when looking for partnerships?
Yeah. If the batteries had demonstrated to be a key factor in the BEV vehicle competitiveness, the fuel cell is also higher. I mean, the technology that is involved is also higher than the batteries that are used for the electric vehicles. So for this reason, we have found an agreement with an important bus manufacturer in Portugal, that is Caetano, that is working with us for a common product. The company is participated by Toyota, and no, we know that only who has the technology in the car segment can have the volume to develop, let me say, a competitive fuel cell in terms of performance, cost, and so on, because the volume that are there are some zero more than the buses. Okay, so the fact to use a fuel cell derived from car application with a hybrid system can match the, let me say, the performance of the vehicle and the reliability and the cost effectiveness of a fuel cell of big volumes in the car sector. And this is the reason why this agreement that we are proceeding for a common platform vehicle, as I told before, always electric and the fuel cell together.
Thank you, Luca. So partnerships are very important here, I heard. Stefano, somehow I think you're somewhere positioned in the middle. Punch is part of a huge group with very large companies in the background. Somehow it's also the new technology division within that. So where do you see yourself, and how important are for you then startups on the outside of this group and building partnerships with the ecosystem?
Yeah, I share 100% what was said by the colleagues before, in the sense that in terms of partnership, for us is really important. This partnership that we have with General Motors is also part of our history, General Motors, because they can provide the volumes and the cost that are linked to these big players. On the other side, when you needed to be fast to answer to special customer needs, then you needed to have the startup with you, because they are the most flexible systems, subjects that can help you to go very fast towards the needs of customers. So in Punch Group, we are already accelerating some startups in the area of artificial intelligence. So this artificial intelligence is something that is really important, because today we discussed a lot of hardware, how to improve the hardware. But once you have the hardware, you need also to optimize the hardware that you have, to optimize the usage of the hardware. And in this case, the software is playing a very important role. So both parts are really relevant. The startups and the big partner are relevant for Punch Hydrocells.
Thank you, Stefano. We're almost at the end. I have one last question for a future transport minister in Italy, as Riccardo said it, Antonello. So technology is very important. There's a lot of groundbreaking, really scientific technology being made, but it all needs to center around the user. Otherwise, it won't be adopted. So how important from a design perspective is it to be in touch with startups, to be in touch with young targets group, to really make sure you're developing with the right user in mind?
Yeah, your question is very interesting, because it's what we do normally, not only on the buses, but also in the cars with the customer. So the first thing is to listen to the needs of the operator, but also to the final client. And this is a must in order to ensure the success of a project. Interviewing and analyzing the answer give us a clear understanding of what the market has or lacks. In this case, for the new generation of vehicle, a particular attention has to be dedicated to the millennials and the Generation Z needs. As we know, they are increasingly interested in up-to-date technology like onboard connectivity in order to check the bus route, environmentally friendly design, and more personalized experience. Then we have to research how to provide the changes we could fulfill most of the request. Of course, very often it's not possible to fulfill every request, but we need to fulfill most of them. This done, we start summing up and putting together all pieces into something which must be eye-catching, emotional, remembered, operatively successful, and fulfilling all the constraints. We can assess this confidence because it is exactly what our group provides from long-lasting experience born with first Father Giugiaro, so Giorgetto Giugiaro and Fabrizio Giugiaro, when we working in Italy Design, and we are continuing now with Giugiaro Architettura and GFG Style. The anticipation of the demand for the customer has always been our mission, that we have to renew every day, because otherwise we cannot continue our job. So we can offer our enthusiasm and our passion. Every day we face new challenges, and our goal is to satisfy our clients and the final customer needs. Only when we reach the goal, we can declare our full satisfaction. Otherwise, we didn't reach the goal, and for us, it's impossible not to reach the goal. So stay ready, concentrated, humble. These are the keywords of Giugiaro Architettura Group and the GFG Style.
Thanks a lot, Antonello. I think those are also great words to actually finish our panel here. It's been a great pleasure to have you all on board, Luca, Riccardo, Stefano, Francesco, and Antonello. Thanks a lot for your insights. It's a very complex topic, so hence this has only been a small part of a longer roadshow because there's so many more topics to be discussed. Thanks a lot to you guys for really giving us an insight specifically into how the Italian industry is approaching the topic and how it's positioning itself. And for the last famous closing words, I'll give back to Gaia and Pier Goffredo. I think you're still on mute, Gaia.
Sorry, that's it from Italy. We would like to thank all our live stream viewers, of course, all our panelists. It was an extremely interesting discussion, and of course, the BUS2BUS team for hosting the event. Now we are showing a short video of BUS2BUS, so enjoy it and see you next time. Have a nice day.